A society's first obligation is to protect its citizens from harm.
And the obligation to save a life should be the primary value that governs our actions.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall meeting. I'm James Weingardner filling in for Pastor Lutz, who is sort of in quarantine. We've got the quarantine edition of this program, and we've reduced our panel to 4 to provide for better social distancing, and yet we have great and important subjects to discuss today. And we'd like to introduce to you our panelists who are going to discuss the subject of 2 ships. We'll begin over here with Bishop Olson.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas, a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
And we're really glad you're here to join us for this important topic. We're dealing with the sanctity of life. South Florida is the cruise capital of the world, with millions of passengers passing through Miami and Fort Lauderdale each year. In late March, 2 Holland American cruise ships, the Coral Princess and the Holland American Zaandam, set off the coast of Florida with dozens of passengers and crew stricken by the novel coronavirus. 4 passengers aboard Zaandam had already perished, with more than 100 passengers and dozens of crew members suffering from flu-like symptoms. At first, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis refused to let the ships dock in Florida, saying, "I don't want to be in a situation where those beds could have gone to Floridians." Pressure mounted from the president and from Dr. Anthony Fauci, who said, "You have to take care of the people who are ill. You just have an obligation to do that, and as quickly as possible." Eventually, DeSantis relented, noting that many passengers were already Florida residents. To decision makers, there were 2 fundamental issues at play. On the one hand, policymakers need to keep the populations under their jurisdiction safe. On the other hand, we must ask ourselves, what is our obligation to the stranger when human life is at stake? Let's turn to our panelists and ask the following questions. Number 1, what does your religious tradition teach regarding the obligation to save human life? To what degree is a society required to endanger itself to render aid? And 2, should we consider citizenship when deciding whether to offer safe harbor? Should it matter if the passengers were American citizens or Florida citizens? To what extent should our country be responsible for protecting foreign nationals? Rabbi Levin?
Well, living in South Florida, we were watching this particular case with a lot of interest, and I don't envy those who had to make these very difficult decisions. Because on the one hand, our tradition teaches, Al ta'mod al dam re'echa, you do not stand by the blood of your neighbor. When you see someone who's in crisis, when you see someone who's in danger, you have to protect that individual. At the same time, there is a passage in the Talmud that talks about what happens when you have 2 people who are trying to cross a desert and one of them has enough water that could sustain him, but the other partner does not. What does the law require? Do you share the water and then both perish, or is it your responsibility to protect yourself? And it's interesting, the rabbis debate this, and one of them says you have to share the water, because they say, how can you say, is your blood any redder than the others? And then the other rabbi comes back and says, no, you should harness that for your own well-being, because who's to say that his blood is any redder than yours? And that there is built into the sense of Jewish tradition this idea that you have to try to care for as many people as possible, and you have to try not to allow people to fall into a bad way, but you're not obligated to endanger yourself in order to do that. Similarly, there are also provisions in Jewish law that talk about the requirement to defend borders, that you have to ensure the safety and the security of those that live within your borders. And at a time where you had the pandemic causing literally an explosion of viral cases that were taxing local hospitals, where they were literally wondering, are there going to be enough ICU beds? I can empathize with the difficult decisions that folks had to make, even though at the same time we do have an obligation to protect each and every human life.
Bishop Olson.
Thank you very much. I think in our tradition is the manual tradition of casuistry, and as far as these sort of principles and cases and arguing this. Of course, the first obligation would be do no harm, and life is of a great sacred position, so much so that it is extremely important to be guarded and safeguarded and affirmed and protected. However, it's not ultimately the greatest good either. The greatest good in our tradition would be the love of God and neighbor, our ultimate end, and our capacity to do so. And also, we're not obliged to the impossible. And so I think what we saw here as well is that the rationing decisions that are called for really can't be just simply adjudicated by an unbridled free market, the way we usually ration healthcare in our country. My concern in this particular case, though, was the use of citizenship as the line of demarcation to decide who gets care and who doesn't. When really, I think that the primacy of life and the importance of human life as well, and as Dr. Fauci said, the obligation to protect and care for the sick, I think supersedes that. But again, I don't empathize with those, the governor or anyone else who is responsible for those decisions.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes, this is a very interesting topic, and as the other panelists have said, I just don't envy these individuals who were in this position. And I followed this, and I said, wow, you have to take care of your own. That's responsible. That's understandable. I can't criticize someone for wanting to take care of their own citizens. And at the same time, I am saying you have to take care of those people too. I mean, those two realities for me, they exist simultaneously. I know that may sound kind of strange, but it's you can't leave them out there. You have to take care of them. They're made in the image of God. We are all from one ancestry, according to the Scriptures. And we're in a time of a pandemic that is unprecedented. And God breathed into breath, into man breath, and we just have to help them. And I would err on the side of getting those folks off and treat them and do a lot of praying. And that's my gut instinct. And just, I think if it were me, I would probably not sleep at night either way it goes, but I probably would sleep an hour more if I got them off.
Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. You know, the Bible commands us to take special care of widows and orphans and strangers at the gate. And the strangers at the gate part are specifically for situations like this. For in ancient times, they often faced concerns that any stranger coming into the compound, the enclave of a particular family or of a village or of a city posed a threat, either from disease or because of some ill intention that they had. And the law of God required that in a way that was odd and new for those times, that one owed hospitality to those people. Now, there were also cities for people in certain situations where people were quarantined, so to speak. They were set aside if they were lepers or if they had other conditions. So those ancient societies whose writers have brought us our scriptures had already dealt with these kinds of issues and still came down on the side of, we have a special obligation for widows and orphans and strangers at the gate. And that is because we usually have more resources than we think we do. We usually have more ability than we think we do. And in this case, it turned out we had more ability to take care of folk than we think we did. Even in places not like South Florida, but like New York City, where they had such a population of people who were ill. They had healthcare workers flooding in from far away. Medical equipment that was being shared. Anyway, I think that when we have the times that in our history we have turned folk away in similar situations, history has judged us harshly. And I think particularly of a shipload of Jews who were thought to be undesirables, who were turned away at this country. What was the name of the ship? The St. Louis? Yeah.
St. Louis.
Boat people from Cuba who were thought to be communists and therefore a threat. Muslims coming in on airplanes, thought to be terrorists. History has judged us in each of those cases harshly. And again, it's because we generally have more ability to care than we initially think we do. These are difficult triage ethical decisions, but we usually have more ability than we think we do.
Bishop Olson.
I think that your last point there, Tom, about it's always amazing what you're able to do, relying on God's grace when you're met with what you previously thought was impossible, and that whether it's resources or how we approach things. And I think there are a lot of stories like that during this pandemic that are yet to be told about how people have turned to these resources. I think some of the arguments or in the public discourse and on the media over this issue, particularly or this case, were taking it away from the governor for a moment and the owners of the ships and the countries of the foreign nationals involved here. Just some of the way people would try to come up with a plan of rationing or what they're doing, and really tells the values that come out as far as citizenship or just will they fit here? What does that mean? I just think it speaks a lot that under the pressure that we've been under, what people immediately turn to as their values, it really comes clear. You really see kind of the true mettle or character of people in times of distress. And most of the time, the courageous rise to the top and step forward.
Amen. Rabbi Levin.
So I think that the sage Hillel in the section of the Talmud called Pirkei Avot, which is the chapters of the fathers where the rabbi sat around and said, what was the best piece of wisdom that your teachers ever taught you? The great sage Hillel is famous for saying, Im ein ani li mili, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And then he said, Uchshe'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, but if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And the reason why Hillel was a genius is he didn't answer the question, right? He just asked those questions, right? That we have to sort of try to figure out how we hold those things in balance. I think it's very easy to take a look at some of the heroic actions that folks have taken in extraordinary times where they put themselves in danger and say, well, that is the archetype. I'm reminded of, there was a village in southern France during World War II called Le Chambon. The pastor there, a man named André Trocmé, saw all of these Jewish refugees who were flooding through the town trying to find anywhere they could hide. And he said to his church and to his community, we will be a city of refuge. And he was responsible for saving thousands of people at the peril of his own life and that of his family. And we look at that and we say, well, look at the virtue in that. And I think, though, at the same time, it's also easy to forget that we do have an obligation for self-care. We do have an obligation to protect those who are within our own borders. I'm reminded my sister was hosting an exchange student who lived in the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in Italy, in northern Italy, just outside Milan. And in the outbreak of the pandemic, all exchange students were asked to go home. And I remember talking to my sister, my God, they're going to send Gloria home to the epicenter? And but at that time, people had to return to their nation of origin. That was sort of what was right for the United States, and not just right for the United States, but for all peoples. And so I think while we certainly have to adhere to that commandment, which appears 36 times in the first 5 books of the Bible, to love the stranger, that doesn't obviate the need to care for the self.
True. I think, too, we're not obliged to the heroic, and you're not obliged to the impossible in our tradition. I think, too, the discernment of it is really what is possible and what is heroic, and charity begins at home. I mean, if you don't have a healthy self-love, you can't love anybody, you know, and I think that all of those points are taken. I just think it's it requires a standard kind of community or a base community to really provide the milieu or the context in which we make these discernment and decisions. I think too frequently we rely on just simply individualism and self-preservation, which I think is a different thing than self-love. Self-preservation is focused on survival, you know, and I think self-love is focused on flourishing. And I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two in times of crisis, but I think it's really incumbent upon us to foster a sense of community where we're able to turn to the resources we do have and perhaps ration them very reasonably as much as we're able to do so.
Dr. Matthews?
Yes, and for me, additionally, you had cases of COVID-19 in both places. So you're not dealing with apples and oranges, and I think the resources we've had could help. And another powerful tool that humanity has is just empathizing. I put myself in the people's shoes who are on the boat or the ship. You know, wow. You know, so when we put ourselves in their shoes and we're thinking about why we're here in the U.S., we should be helped. I'm reminded of a story told about a young class being told the story of the Good Samaritan, and the teacher was asking, well, what did you get out of the story? And all the kids said, well, if somebody's, you know, hurting, I need to help them, and, you know, I need to pray for them and not leave them. And another kid said, well, I get out of the story that when I'm hurt, somebody should help me. Yeah. So, and I think this is such a great witness to humanity as well when we sometimes we have to be vulnerable, and when you have a global crisis like this, and to help people, I think it's a great witness to the world.
Thank you, panelists. We, I think, have learned a lot about the faith-based approach to what it means to be a good neighbor. Right now, let's look at a message from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching.
Welcome back, and we certainly appreciate the sponsorship of the American Town Hall, and we are looking forward to hearing our panelists' final summations, and we begin with Bishop Olson.
The recognize our neighbor in need is something that is essential to not only our faith traditions, but also to what it means to be a human being. Oftentimes, our question really should be, how do we help, and what's the best way to help, than whether we help at all.
Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I preached a sermon very recently titled, "Can We Do That?" And it was a sermon built on the Jesus's looking at the crowd with compassion, seeing that they were harassed and that they were like sheep without a shepherd, and then saying to his disciples, I give you authority to, and then he named all sorts of absolutely crazy things for a bunch of uneducated hicks from Galilee. Healing every disease, healing every illness, raising the dead. These people that was their mission. They were to go and do that. The question for us is, can we do that? Particularly in a time where it seems so scary, like the time we're in right now? And the answer is, we've usually got a whole lot more to us and from God than we ever think possible.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes, to the question, what is our obligation to save human life? For me, life is everything. Jesus Christ said He is the way, the truth, and the life. He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And I believe that life should be saved and preserved from before birth and after birth. And if anyone's hurting or in need, I just think we need to do the very best that we can do to save a human life. And then ultimately for the Christian, we know that Christ came so that we can have eternal life. So life is crucial, and we always err on the side of saving life.
Rabbi Levin.
I'm reminded in the mid-1970s, an Air France jet was hijacked that was traveling from Tel Aviv to Paris and was taken to Libya. And then the Jewish passengers were segregated from the other passengers and then were flown to Entebbe. And people didn't know what to do. The French said, I don't know what to do, even though it was an Air France jet. Mm-hmm. There were other nationalists that said, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to do. And the Israelis took a look and said, those are my people. And they mounted probably the most audacious military rescue effort in modern history. to try to rescue the hostages from the terminal in the airport in Entebbe, and were able to do so almost with perfect precision. And I was talking with other friends about it, and they said, you know, that's part of what it is to be part of a people, that when you're in trouble, your people go and get your people. And I think that there is something about how citizenship, membership kind of does have a privilege. But at the same time, I think we have to be reminded of the fact that each and every single human life is of infinite and ultimate value. That in the book of Genesis, when the creation story is being told, God creates swarms of bears, bees, bugs, and birds, but one human being. And so the rabbis ask, well, what's that to teach you? And it's to teach you that if you save a single human life, it's as if you saved an entire world. And if you destroy a single human life, it is as if you destroyed an entire world. And to remind you that no matter who we are and where we come from, we all extend from the same parentage. That I can't say that my lineage is any greater than yours. So when we try to figure out how it is that we're supposed to manage these incredibly difficult ethical constructs, that we have to open our hearts as wide as possible, as you say, to inhabit the experience of the other, while at the same time not surrendering the obligation to care for the self.
Very good. Thank you, Rabbi. From our earliest history that our rabbi has suggested, all the way to our more recent scriptures, it says, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And so we're given specific instruction that our responsibility is to take into our hearts, take into our care the love of other people. And specifically in our country today, right now, I think that means other people unlike ourselves. There are an awful lot of people out there who have been oppressed and harassed and treated with utmost disdain. And it is our job to lift them up, as would Jesus, as would the God of the Old Testament, as would His followers of all time. And that's who we are. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitance. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, respective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.